Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'm going to open this meeting of the Nottingham Board of Selectmen for Tuesday, November 26, 2019. And before we begin, will you please all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, as we just had a meeting last week, we have no manifests. And we will do our minutes next week as we normally do. I assume action items from last meeting, that would be why we're here tonight. Not going to do boards and committees tonight because we'll be doing that Monday. Town administrator, got anything you need to brief us on tonight?
Just one thing, I wanted to give you the opportunity to slow us down on the health insurance option that I wrote to you about. We need to go or no go, and I haven't heard from any of you, so I think you don't have questions, but I wanted to do that before we make that second option available. Questions, comments? Or
Do you want to decide that tonight or by next week? By next meeting?
We need to turn them loose tomorrow to do it, to meet all the legal deadlines. So if you have concerns about it, I should hear about it now.
I'm sorry, I didn't look at it. Can you talk us through it?
Offering a second health insurance option to employees. The current plan, rates are going up 7.4%. No great surprise. We are planning to offer a second option, which essentially trades a little bit more deductible risk and slightly higher co-pays for lower premiums. We will take the savings from the lower premiums, pass some of it back to the employees, kind of in exchange for that risk if they choose, and save some of it ourselves. Combine that with something called a health reimbursement arrangement, an HRA, where we will cover a portion of the deductible. So we're basically taking on some risk in worst case scenarios for deductibles in exchange for lower premiums. The worst case scenarios, and almost in, I think it's 16 out of 18 of our enrollees right now, the worst case scenarios are, even if they come true, cheaper than the money we're going to save. So we're not, the risk is negligible for what is essentially guaranteed savings. It's not huge numbers, something in that I think will probably, depending on how many employees select that new option, probably take $10,000 off the budget, something like that. We have to see who wants to participate in what before we can know what that number is finally. But for the employee's sake, it means more money in their pocket or less coming out of their paycheck. They pay a portion of the premium, so they'll capture some of that savings and pay a little bit higher copay.
So does it become basically a net for them?
It's a net savings for them. It's a net savings for us.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not a dramatic change, but it does involve like essentially a self-insurance risk, which we don't really have much of right now. So that's why I throw it to you to say it's an unknown. Right now we know what our premiums are going to be if we stay fully staffed. We know more or less what we're going to pay. If we do this, there's a little bit more unknown, but I think we're almost guaranteed to save money. We're virtually guaranteed to save money. It's a little bit more complicated. Some employees may not want to deal with that. They may, be comfortable with what they have, but it is a cash savings for them.
So we're going to give them an option.
An option, yep. Stay with what we have, or take this
Higher
new
deductible plan.
It's not what you think of in the in the classic high deductible, those really high deductible plans that usually come attached to a health savings account, it's not that high. We're talking about, for an individual, we're going from 1,000 to 3,000 in an annual deductible. But the town's taking on the second half of that 3,000. So if somebody and they choose the new option, the deductible used to be 1,000, now it's 3,000. If they get to 1,500, the town's gonna pay the second 1,500 of that deductible. So the added risk for them is smaller, and that's where our risk comes in.
Right.
We're gonna save more than $1,500 in premiums for almost everybody, so. It's a simplified
employee?
version, but per employee, yeah. That's a simplified version, there are a few other variables, but, that's the gist of it. The numbers for families are bigger. Our family premiums right now are $22,000. You have it there in
Yep,
front of you.
yep, yep.
So the numbers get bigger as you look at family plans, but that's the gist.
And our aggregate savings depend, like you said, on how many people actually enroll in it.
Yeah, we never know coming into the year what our full health insurance cost is gonna be, because we don't know who our employees are gonna be at year end and whether they're gonna be single people or two-person plans or families. So there's always a bit of an unknown there. This makes that unknown a little bit bigger because we don't know what our deductible cost is gonna be.
But the health coverage doesn't change, just the deductibles and all that.
The deductibles and the co-pays change, but what is covered is identical.
Is there additional administrative burden on this?
No, our provider takes care of all that stuff. It's all done through payroll deduction. The same time, for all employees that are benefit eligible, we're gonna offer a flexible savings account. You may know those from your private employers, pre-tax dollars for medical expenses. So in sharing some of the savings, employees are taking on more risk, so we're sharing some of the savings on the premiums with them. We're gonna put a little bit in each employee's flexible savings account. So,
We're gonna put it in, or we're
yep,
giving?
they can put some in too. They can put they can put in up to, $1,300 or something like that. We're gonna put in $250.
Yeah.
Which will help cover those higher copays. Even doing that, so we're gonna start the flexible savings accounts, and we're gonna cover that risk on the deductibles. Those two combined are still less than what we're gonna save on the premiums. Follow that?
Yep. Yep. Have you discussed this at all with any of the employees to kind of get their feedback on it?
A few around the office, just
Yeah.
testing the theory of,
Yeah.
is this how you would look at this? We very much want to make it an option at this point, because people, what we have is pretty good, works
Yep.
pretty well.
Yep.
Some people aren't going to want the complexity of it and the risk of having to come up with more money.
Yeah.
Some people will do the math and say, oh yeah, that makes sense, I can prepare for that.
Yeah.
So entirely a choice. The original plan will feel identical to what they have now. People aren't even gonna get new insurance cards if they stay with the
Okay.
current plan, so.
So there's really no downside to us offering a second option?
We haven't found it,
Okay.
no, and it's common, other towns are doing similar things.
Yep.
We can tweak it year to year. We always look at these things, and the numbers finally work this year to do something. The difference between those two premiums was big enough this year that it's worth trying something. It doesn't work, nobody wants it, we don't have to offer it in 21. But it'll save money for sure.
Okay.
Questions for Chris on that? Nope. Nope. All right, you want us to vote on, or you just want to?
No, it's just, I've laid out what I'm gonna do, if you wanna stop me, but otherwise
No, it
we're
makes
going.
sense to me.
Yeah,
Makes
yes.
sense. It's fine.
Drive forward.
I don't have anything else. I can't wait till Monday, so.
Okay.
Chris, has a new truck arrived?
It has. As has the new police cruiser.
Nice. Are we, take photos and post it and thank the town?
Just got photos today.
Great.
I think we're still waiting on decals for the trade, the, what would have been the old police cruiser that's going to Public Works has not been decaled yet. The new cruiser is, slightly, it'll look just a little bit different. It's a little bit different,
Body design.
a little bit different body design, a little bit different decal package. Just came back this morning.
So it's all kitted out, lights,
Waiting on one mount for the MDTs. Other than that, it's ready to go.
control PC.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's out back?
Yeah, probably. I don't imagine he put it on the road tonight, so it's probably out back, yep.
Oh, that's right, the mounts are specific to the year and the model.
Yeah.
All right, anything else for Chris? No? All right. Moving on to general business, Class 5 road standards. So, 2 meetings ago, we had homework to read through these, and we were gonna review them last week. But I was sick, and I appreciate you all waiting for me to come back so we can discuss this. So, we have our original draft, and then we have some edits from the town attorney. And I'm gonna open this up for discussion. Let's hear what everybody thinks of this.
So are we, let me just make sure I understand what we're doing here tonight, because we have the edits from the town attorney, and then we have the potential second standard for secondary roads.
For gravel roads,
So
yeah.
are we going over both of those tonight?
Well, let's start with the Class 5 standards, because that's been on our plate for a few weeks.
But I thought that was the whole reason why we pushed Chris and team to get this secondary one to us tonight. I mean, Ben,
Yep.
chime in, so.
Yep.
We can absolutely discuss them
I'd
tonight.
like to see a final decision on at least, you know, the draft version, in my opinion.
Okay.
I don't know how the rest of the board feels, Tyler.
So just, again, to be very specific and clear, are we looking for final on the original standards for town roads with the lawyers' edits, and then,
And then we can move on to the gravel.
and when we move on to the gravel, are we looking for discussion about suggested changes, or what are we looking for?
Well, we've just got these in the past couple of days, so I
Right.
don't think we're ready to make a final move on that
Okay.
yet. So we
I just
can
wanna be-
absolutely,
Just want to be clear.
I think we've had enough time to review it. Correct me if I'm wrong, John, Tyler, if you want to chime in. We need to move forward with it. And if that means we adopt what the engineers have come up with, so be it. I mean, it is open to discussion, and, you know, that's what we're here for, to come up with a solution and move forward with it. But, I mean, we've got, you know, folks that live on the road here, been waiting long enough for us to come up with a standard here, and we owe it to the rest of the town as well.
not yet?
Not yet.
All I'm trying to do, Tony, is just like pin down what's the outcome of this meeting. That's all I'm trying to do.
I have said it twice now, so
Okay, so, I'm sorry, could you articulate it one
Okay.
more time?
let's come to a final decision on Class 5 standards, and then we can move on to discussing the gravel standards.
So it's
If you wanna-
discussion,
yes,
it's
we-
discussion only.
I didn't say that. If we discuss and we're all comfortable with it as is, we can certainly move to adopt it tonight. If you want to propose changes, then we can discuss those.
Okay.
So first, let's discuss these Class 5 road standards. I'd like everybody to chime in.
So you want to start from the top and just go down through them?
Yep.
If somebody has a question about one of the numbers, we'll go from.
Just start from the top.
Yep.
All right, so if I'm looking at the edited version of the standard for town roads, and again, just, I mean, kind of, correct me, Chris, if I'm not reading this correctly, but the opening paragraph is changed from, these are the suggested minimum design standards. Every effort should be made to exceed these minimums whenever possible. The circumstance of topography and other physical factors may require an occasional exception to these standards. However, the selectmen should exercise reasonable judgment before granting such variations. The lawyers' recommended changes were, these design standards are developed to guide the reconstruction or relocation of existing Class 5 roads and acceptance of pre-existing private roads. So if we're looking at a separate standard for what you, Tony, have started calling legacy roads, then that would not be a clause that we would want there, correct?
Well, not all the pre-existing private roads are in the same condition.
Then what's the, like, I don't follow. Because wouldn't this second standard apply to the pre-existing private roads?
Well, the opening paragraph on this proposed gravel road standard indicates that it's not just for gravel roads in general, but including the legacy roads, as we're calling them. So I would take it to be these gravel road standards would be a precursor to the Class 5 standards. I mean, that's what we've,
The guidance to the engineers was, we have a general standard for Class 5 roads.
yeah.
What can we do that is less than that standard for roads that, pre-existing roads that we may want to make Class 5 roads? So, the starting point for the minimum design standards was essentially, what's the standard for new roads that we build as a town for some reason, or what is the standard to which we try to maintain them? Pre-existing roads. What we asked the engineer for was, what could we accept that's less than that, knowing that we have miles and miles of roads that will never meet the Class 5 standard that we're about to create.
So my recommendation on that opening paragraph would be to just change it to, these design standards are developed to guide the reconstruction or relocation of existing Class 5 roads, period. In the event these standards conflict with planning board standards, the more stringent provisions shall control.
But that would leave out these standards being a guideline for new Class 5 road construction.
Well, how much new Class 5 construction is there gonna be that's not part of subdivisions?
No, not likely.
I mean, none of us can tell the future. We don't want to hamstring a future board with a standard that doesn't have to be followed under certain circumstances.
What I'm trying to do is avoid confusion between saying the acceptance of pre-existing private roads in this standards and then having this standard apply to legacy roads? Because what's the difference between the two? And, I mean, guys, correct me if I'm headed down the wrong path
No,
with
I'm agree
this.
with you.
So, assuming we did that, how would these standards apply to somebody that is building a road across their slab of property with the intent of making it a town road to reach some development they're creating? Whatever the circumstance is for making a new road,
That would
how
be,
would these standards apply if it doesn't apply to new construction? Because that road would start out as a private road and eventually be adopted by the town,
Yeah, but
right?
new roads that are being developed meet like the subdivision standards. If you're saying that it's first off, somebody's cutting a road across their property, that's not gonna become a town road. But you said,
Well, you don't know that. It may.
how?
I mean, typically that's done when you're creating a development.
But they're meeting the development standards. If it's related to a development, they're meeting the new development.
Right. But,
Standards.
see, but that's where the confusion comes in, because you're using one set of standards for new construction, a different set of standards for reconstruction. We just need to have one standard that applies across the board to these. I mean, that was the
Well-
lawyer's guidance, was that
Well,
it's
we-
either a standard or it's not.
But we knew that these weren't the same as new subdivision standards, correct? I mean, correct me if I'm
Yeah, we
wrong.
carved those out specifically because there's already regulations governing those.
So do those complement each other?
These are less stringent, less detailed than the subdivision regulations. Intentionally. They're roads we already own, or in some cases, the roads we could come to own, that realistically can't meet that subdivision standard.
Right.
Okay?
so what is preventing, future, standards being changed, existing development becomes a town road? I'm gonna use Dunbarton as an example. They make the argument to use the lesser standard.
The planning board has the authority to deal with that in any way they want to begin with. They can make exceptions to that. I'm pretty sure it's, part of the planning board process that if they want to do something differently, they can.
I'm just concerned that we may be opening up Pandora's box if we have multiple standards. Would the rest of the board agree?
See, my interpretation of this was always that these were to bring up the town roads, the roads that the town is maintaining now, or the roads that we consider, that are town roads, that are up to this standard. And for instance, use one as Poor Farm Road. Will not meet these new standards.
Nope.
So the opening paragraph does say reconstruction or relocation of existing class 5 roads.
So we'd bring this, well, my interpretation is this new standard here would be to upgrade,
When,
to give the town to say, this is what we need to do to upgrade town, Poor Farm Road. And I just use that
when
for
we
example.
go to do reconstruction on that
When we go
road,
to
this is
do
the standard we
reconstruction.
want to meet.
Exactly.
Yeah. It doesn't say construction of new roads, right?
Correct.
Yeah. That's where the subdivision requirements come in,
And that's where the planning board
and
will,
that's where the planning board comes in.
Jurisdiction.
because there's gonna be more involved with that, because now they have to do drainage, wetlands, they have to do all that, where our roads now, we don't,
Yep.
you know, they're there, so.
So it's the and acceptance of pre-existing private roads that I'm questioning, because what we've said is, you know, I think we kind of used the word that we need a pathway, right? And that there, we wanted a set, I mean, you used the term legacy roads, it's like we needed that standard and pathway for legacy roads. So it's just gonna cause confusion if we say pre-existing private roads in this, and then have a second standard.
So you're saying you want to do away with the other standard?
No, I'm saying that I want to strike and acceptance of pre-existing private roads from the design standard for town roads, the edit that the lawyer made. I want to strike and acceptance of pre-existing private roads.
But don't you think that might have the effect of exempting future private roads, maybe private roads that don't exist yet? Exempt them from having to meet any standards before they're adopted as town roads?
Well, legacy roads is the wrong name for this, right? But I
And
think,
you know what's gonna happen too is also, is when you mentioned this before with these private roads, is just what happened at the select board, at the, town meeting, if I'm correct on this, is when somebody's asking for this road to come up and become a town road, we hand them this and say, do you meet these standards? They're gonna have to meet these, if they're gonna try to make that private road a
well, I don't know
town
that,
road.
well, where does this come in then?
What do you mean? The other people?
So, take Moore's Road, for example.
Okay.
Moore's Road expressed an interest in becoming a town road. Town meeting conditionally approved that. They've never come to find out what the standards are. If they did come to see what the standards are, which set of standards do we give them?
Well, they're gonna go under this one because the town has been maintaining that road.
Okay,
So it goes under the standard for legacy roads, if you'd say, because the town has been maintaining those for 50 years, or for, whatever you wanna say, for how long.
yep, yep.
But this new road, town has never maintained, never plowed, never touched. So it's a different ballgame.
Okay,
We have no financial we have no interest in that road.
okay.
Because we haven't done anything to it.
But again, so if somebody builds two houses, right? And they put a road into those two, you know, wooded lot, they clear the wooded lot, they put two houses in there, they put what they call a road into that.
We call the shared driveway.
Okay,
It would
so,
classify itself as a road.
but if somebody, what's the definition for a subdivision? Is it dependent on number of,
Yes,
okay. So if it's a certain number of houses, it's a shared driveway, not our problem. If it's the limit of what a subdivision is, then it's the subdivision standards.
correct.
Yep,
Which is ruled by the planning board.
correct. So that says that there's really no scenario where somebody's gonna put in a new private road that they're then going to come to the town and ask the town to accept it.
Well, if you're talking about a two-house case, then yeah, they have no.
No,
reason
I'm
to
just
come
trying
to
to figure out, is there a point where somebody can build a road that's a private road, that's not a shared driveway, that's not a subdivision, that would give them, you know, an opening to come to town meeting and say, I want to turn this private road into a town road?
Well, then, well, if it's a
can
road that
always
goes to
ask.
nowhere and there's no houses, there's no lots, there's no nothing, it's just a path. So there is no such thing as a road. Now, if it's going to more than two houses, then it's now gonna be, they'll have to fall under subdivision
Okay,
regulations.
that's all I was trying to figure out.
You can't build.
There's no in between a shared driveway and a subdivision. That's all I was trying to figure out. Okay.
You have any interest in incorporating the engineers, something like the engineers' suggested specs into this design standards, just making one document that treats two different kinds of roads differently?
I mean, I think we could do that.
Merge them, in a sense.
Yeah.
Section,
I mean, if you're still. if
section
you-
one for class
you-
5
I think
roads.
you need to come to a consensus on how you're gonna, approach this from a principal point of view. You've said you want one standard, period, and you two are still talking about two
Well,
or
there's one
maybe
thing-
three
there's one-
standards. So
there's
you
one-
gotta
so-
solve that before you decide what the document looks like, but.
I don't think it
But-
matters whether it's one or two. I think it's the,
Does- may not,
it's the
but-
subject.
Because once the legacy roads, that road that's, done, then I mean, this is gonna be still the standard. We're not gonna have any more legacy roads or,
But we can turn it into one document that says, if you meet this criteria, you follow this standard. If you meet this criteria, you follow this standard, which is what I think you're suggesting. But it's the substance of the content. Doesn't matter whether it's two documents or one, right?
No, do you have a consensus about, do you wanna have two different standards? I don't know that you even have that much yet.
Fair enough.
well, in my opinion, the first set of standards, ones we're talking about here, not the, I wanna use the legacy, is for the fact of getting our town roads, the ones the town owns now, up to a standard. And again, I use Port Farm Road, where that section of it needs to get up to a class 5 standard. And that's why we have this standard out here. Or any other road, I can go through all the town roads, but, if there's certain spots that need to be widdened to get to this, and they're a town road, then that might happen. I mean, you could go off of, sorry, so let me get to, I have my town map out here, so I can remember all the names of the.
No, we can, Stevens Hill doesn't meet this,
Right.
yeah, portions of Swan, Robin Hood, we could name roads that don't quite meet this, that's easy.
Yeah. In the event that they're reconstructed, then
Yeah.
they would be brought up to this
There's
standard.
probably sections of Mitchell Road that don't meet it either,
Maybe,
or close.
yeah, but anyway,
Or.
whatever.
Or Kennard, right, but that's where I'm, this document, to me, is going for those roads. That's where I'm,
To me as well, and that's because it says to guide the reconstruction or relocation of existing class 5 roads.
right, because we already consider those class 5 roads.
Correct.
Yeah, no, that part's easy, yeah, and if you did that and nothing else, then you have a standard for any road that wants to become a class 5 road as well. You've got a pre-cooked standard, if, like Moore's Road, you said this is the standard, we have a class 5 standard, this is it. So if you treat just this document as the class 5 standard, then that becomes the standard, that's fine, if that's
So-
what you want to do.
So I think what Chris is trying to get us to come to agreement on at this point in time is one standard or two standards. And the one standard, we have two in front of us. One is for the reconstruction and relocation of existing roads, and the other is for a pathway for the emergency lanes that have been maintained for 30-plus odd years, or 50, or whatever the number is.
Which their lots are already their lot lines are already there, everything's already there, so it's not again like a new development
Correct.
where you can make the road as wide as you want, and then make your property lines.
So what we need is agreement from the board that two standards are appropriate. One standard for existing roads that we may want to, over time,
Existing town-owned roads.
existing town-owned roads that over time we want to bring up to a better standard, plus a pathway for the legacy roads to become town-maintained at some point. So that's, the first question is,
Town maintained or town owned?
town-owned, I think. So the fundamental first question is one standard or two standards? I believe we need two. mean, we've been debating this for how long now? And, you know, and every, you know, I think every, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think everybody on this board has expressed the desire to try and work with the people on the emergency lane roads, right? And to me, this kind of like two standard approach is,
That's what I want. I want to work with everybody that we've been talking to. I don't want to work with anybody that would say, I want the second one too. I mean, this is like a, I don't want to say a one-time deal.
yeah.
We want to get this to where it's right for everybody, and then there'll be no more of it. That's what my feelings are.
Yep.
So the second standard that we're talking about for the emergency lane roads is basically a temporary standard
Yeah. I mean, that's,
to get those roads to that level to be accepted as town roads.
Yeah,
Well, it's not written specifically for emergency lanes or the lake roads. It says, legacy road design standards for low-volume gravel roads, because it can have application outside of the emergency lanes.
yeah, but
know,
you're the
even-
one that started applying legacy road to emergency lanes.
It's just a phrase, okay? For lack of a better term, I said legacy roads.
Okay,
Call
but-
it what you want.
Yeah, but you just said this doesn't apply just to emergency lanes, which is kind of where we all started.
No, but I'm saying this has applicability to non-emergency lane private roads. It can. It can help guide the condition of those roads too.
What roads are you talking about?
I don't know them all by name.
Are there
No.
private roads that are not emergency lanes
Yes,
that the town maintains?
no.
No.
So therein is the difference for me.
So the non-emergency lane private roads should be held to a different standard? Or do we just want to call it a gravel road standard?
We have no authority or standing over private roads. So whatever standard you set doesn't apply to them. They're like driveways.
Well, all the emergency lanes are private roads too, so we technically don't have any authority to impose a standard on them either.
Nope.
So none of this has to be abided by.
Not on private property, no. That's why it's set up for class 5 roads. That's,
All right.
Yeah.
No, I'm talking about the low-volume gravel roads. I mean, we can't say that these are the standards for, for the lake roads and the emergency lanes because they are private property and we have no jurisdiction to impose any kind of standard on them.
No, we're saying those are the standard to become
they're gonna become town.
town roads.
Because there's gonna be enough people to vote for them to make them town roads, if they meet to these standards. So that we'll be able to pass if it goes in front of the, town meeting.
Where does it say that?
Well, I'm just saying, if a road gets approved by the town votes on it, right? That's how you get a road approved by the town.
Yeah.
So if the roads meet the standard, literally, they can petition their road to become a town road.
So how does that work on a road like White's Grove where you got multiple owners of that road? You're essentially taking land from them.
Well, there's a choice of whether,
So it would
If they
be
say-
incumbent upon the residents of that road to speak to one another and come forward to the town and present, yes, we want to become a town
Yeah.
road, once we meet these standards.
Yes.
But they all have to be in agreement.
50% of it,
51?
50 plus 1.
51% have to.
which I'm.
And the
I would
petition-
not be
in the-
competent to say that. That would
don't
be-
apply that too broadly.
But I think you know as well as I do.
That is through the
Parts of that
betterment
road don't
assessment
meet the
process.
standard.
Oh, wait, we're wrong.
Yeah, hold on.
Majority? Isn't it majority or something now?
Don't confuse the betterment assessment process
Fine.
with the road acceptance process.
Okay.
Globally.
Okay.
They're-
Is there a threshold for,
I think a road acceptance petition only needs 25 signatures.
Yes, presumably if all the landowners are willing, there's so many different ways that you can create a public road that I think you're probably getting off on tangents that you don't need to. Don't, the 50% plus one, you're thinking of the counter petition to a betterment assessment.
You're right. You're right. So again, the fundamental question is
One standard or two.
one standard or two?
John, one standard or two, and why?
2. That's for all the reasons I just stated.
Okay. Tyler, one standard or two?
Well, I mean, I guess my answer is gonna be based on, so if we just went with this one, are we going to jeopardize trying to make all these roads, town roads?
In practical terms, I think it would be impossible for some of those roads to meet this standard.
Many.
Either physically impossible or the owners wouldn't. They wouldn't want it to happen, they wouldn't let it happen, one or the other. Understandably, it's physically not possible in many cases.
So what we're trying to do is find a way to make these town roads. If some of these roads don't meet up to that standard right now, we can still classify them as emergency lanes until they become up to the standard to get there. That be something to, again, I mean, I'm pretty cool with the first page, just with the one we talked about. For roads the town owns, stands to put on here.
Can we finish though, because you
Sorry.
said, no, you said two, you said,
1.5. No. I'm like, right now, I'm saying 2, yeah. Because I don't think it would be possible to, I guess, some of these, I don't believe some of the roads would ever meet the plan we have in front of us, the one. They could meet this. I don't think they'll meet the one that's been edited, recommendations and stuff from the attorney.
I'm on the fence. I don't think we should deviate from what the attorney had recommended and sticking to one standard. That isn't to say that we could, change it, but, as I mentioned earlier, we could be opening ourselves up for Pandora's box if we have more than one standard, 2, 3 standards, I mean.
Well, looking at the other side of the coin, I mean, back in, when did we last meet out in the big hall?
Was that July? Was it?
doesn't matter when it was, but
Doesn't matter, but that was one of the things we discussed, was creating an alternate standard, however we
But that was,
phrased
that was
it.
before we got some intel from the attorney and what
Right.
his belief should be. And obviously, he's looking out for the best interests of the town, not just the landowners out there, the town in general.
I totally get what you're saying, Ben. I totally get it. And generally, I feel the same way that, the lawyer is paid to keep us out of trouble. However, I personally don't feel that he has a sense and obligation.
Well, he has an obligation to the town.
He does have an obligation to the town, but I also feel that we have an obligation to the folks on these roads because we said that we would try and work with them. And And if we come back and say, nope, there's one standard, this is the standard, and you're never gonna meet it, then we're not working with them.
Tony?
And, well, I mean, what the lawyer puts in here, again, is an opinion. It's his educated opinion of what he thinks should be the right
Based on the
ones.
legality of what is exposing the town to liability.
There's nothing stated about liability anywhere in here.
But that's what their mindset is. They're always looking at ways to limit the liability of what the town is exposed to. That's what we have a retaining fee for them. And we pay him to give us, aside from that, but, you know, we pay him to give us advice on how to proceed,
Yeah. And again, like you just said, it's advice.
based on his legal background.
I mean, I look at it, I mean, no matter what, any road and the people are going to have to come to town meeting to have this approved, no matter what, right? Chris?
Any road will have to go to town meeting to be accepted, but town meeting has no obligation to do so at any standard.
No, that's what I mean,
Take any-
yeah.
And if you adopt something here that is the standard, town meeting does not have to pay attention to that standard. They can,
Right.
town meeting can make anything it wants to be, virtually anything it wants to be a class 5 road.
Right.
So then why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? If they can come in and just, you know, overrule anything that the board tries to come up with to help the town, why are we doing this?
Well, think about the Moores Road petition last year. The Moores Road petition was to accept Moores Road as is.
Well, I get that, but we didn't even have our
Because-
standard then.
Because we asked. Basically, it was their, you know,
Yeah.
you know, it's a road, we'd like it to be a town road, will you accept it? Town meeting chose to condition it on your standards. Those standards didn't exist, but they put authority in the board's hands to say, yeah, we're willing to accept it if it meets a standard that you set. So, town meeting wisely didn't just take it as it was, that's my opinion, didn't just take it as it was. They said, let's make sure it's a good road first.
That's why I believe, I mean, not if the town people vote on this, I think the liability part kind of goes away a little bit, because it was the majority of the people of the town that will vote on this to approve it, wouldn't they?
To accept the road, not
To
the
accept-
standard.
Yeah.
We set the
Yeah,
standard.
yeah, the road. But they'll,
Except the road, yes, but town meeting does not have,
They don't incur
we've not
anything.
discussed the town approving a standard. Like, we're not talking about that in this context.
Well, and the town's also gonna look to us for guidance, right? They're gonna look to us for, does this meet whatever standard exists or not? Hey, Ben, so, I'm not trying to like throw gasoline on the fire or anything, but I just, in the interest of debate and discussion.
Sure.
Right? So say we went with one standard, right? And it's the standard that the lawyer has advised, right? Then going back to all the meetings that we've had with all the folks on these emergency lanes where we've said, we're gonna try and make this work. We're not just gonna rip off the Band-Aid and stop maintaining these roads. We're gonna work with you guys and try to come up with a win-win solution. How do we do that with this one standard?
Again, as I mentioned earlier, we didn't have the guidance or the information input from the attorney when we were making these conversations. Now we have his input. And again, as I mentioned earlier, you know, he puts his notes here in the best interest of the town to limit our liability.
So you're just saying, and I'm apologize.
I mean, can we tweak this a bit to make it? We probably could, but again, I'm concerned with, you know, if, let's say, Poor Farm gets brought up to standard, this particular standard, what's to say 10 years down the road, when it has to be paved again or gravelled again, that they decide to, let's go with the lesser standard. So if we have more than one standard, you're gonna have people make an argument
Who
for
would
each one.
decide that, though? Who's gonna make that decision? Because for town roads, it's the, you know, it's John.
It'd be no different than petition for the, to become a town road.
Yeah, but why would
They
it,
could-
why would
They
any
can go to the planning
residents?
board and say, we'd like to adopt these lesser
Yeah,
standards.
but why
for
would
this."
any residents who live on an existing town road say we want a less standard? Why would they do that?
Maybe cost was involved. I mean, look at Ledge Farm. I mean, look how much that's costing us.
Yeah, but it's a cost that's borne by
No,
the whole
I-
town, not the individuals who live there.
No, I hear you, but in this particular situation, with regards to the private roads and the ELs, even this standard here that we have from the engineers, some of those roads aren't gonna meet that.
That is true. That is true. But I also,
So, so we have two standards. All right, I say, why don't we just dive into the class 5? Let's nail this one down first. All right, and then I'll be willing to discuss, in the best interest of all parties involved, what would the next step be?
so I think that's where we started, and that's, we got off on this because I recommended striking of and acceptance of pre-existing private roads. And I still stand by that.
Right, and I don't recommend that because we do have more private roads than we have emergency lanes.
But they're not.
I know you want to
they're-
accommodate,
But they're not declared emergency lanes.
right, but your goal is to accommodate the emergency lanes and find every way possible to bring them into the fold of being town roads, but we can't hamstring our standards in every direction to make that possible. We've got to have some firmness to the standards for them to be valid, otherwise nobody will need to abide by them.
I think we're getting hung up in hypotheticals. We're getting hung up in hypotheticals, like what, I mean, it's pretty clear, there's emergency lanes that the town's been maintaining for X odd years.
So, instead of acceptance of pre-existing private lanes, acceptance of pre-existing emergency lanes.
Yep. Or just acceptance of
No.
private roads.
No, I don't agree with that, because then what you're saying is there's one standard for all.
But then you're exempting private roads from any standard.
But you're including the emergency lane roads in this standard, unless I misheard that, and I'm misinterpreting that.
Emergency lanes are private roads. Now, we do have a collection of roads that, you know, given their age, they've never been engineered, and they need some kind of accommodation. But I don't think that justifies cutting corners on the standards that will apply to the entire town.
So you're with Ben in the expression of, the lawyer says this is what we should do, so we're just gonna back off of every conversation we've had with people leading up to this.
No, I didn't say that at all. I'm just talking about whether or not to strike those
But
6
if you-
words.
If you don't strike that, then it's the same as saying,
I wouldn't agree with that, no.
okay, how so? How so? Then
Because I don't agree with that, that's all.
why? Because it would say existing private roads. Unless you say existing private roads with the exception of emergency lanes,
If you don't have that language in there, no private road, emergency lane or not, can be held to any standard to become a town road. That's why.
I'm sorry, say that again?
If you strike that language,
Yep.
any private road, whether it's an emergency lane or not, whether it's on the lake or not, or wherever it is, does not have to abide by those standards to become a town road. If you strike any language about private roads.
But again, what private roads are going to want to come forward for this standard that aren't
I don't know, I
emergency
haven't
lanes?
asked the residents on all those.
Okay,
ones.
so
I
again,
don't know.
hypothetical.
No, we can't predict the future. But we can't cut corners on this for the immediate goal of bringing in the
So
lake
then I go back
roads.
to the fact that you're saying one standard, forget everything we've done up to here.
I haven't said that. I
Okay, so
just
then
said,
how do we do
let's
that? How do
not,
we do it then?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't have all the answers.
Well, that's what we're here for. We're supposed to be coming up with answers.
Yes, we are.
So Donna, you want to take out acceptance of pre-existing private roads?
I do. Now, if you want to change that to, pre-existing private roads with the exception of previously declared emergency lanes, then I'm okay with that. Because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the emergency lanes.
And we're not declaring any more roads emergency lanes, it's,
Correct.
Right, okay.
Correct.
because we don't want to be in
But
a
then that would
situation right
allow,
now.
like, a one-lane road like White's Grove Road to become a town road. At whatever it costs to the town,
Not if we have another standard for it. That was the whole purpose of two standards.
Well, say they come forward at town meeting and ask to become a town road.
White's Grove.
White's Grove, yes. Which standard are we gonna hold them to?
This one, because they're an emergency lane.
But this
Assuming they're
doesn't
emergency lanes.
say this is just for emergency lanes. This says it's for gravel roads, legacy road design standards for low-volume gravel roads.
We can change that.
We can change that.
Do you want them?
What-
If you want to rename it to say for the for existing emergency lanes, then we have to have a separate policy for all the other gravel roads in town that are not.
Well, like what? Like what roads?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know them
Well,
all by
then you
name.
keep mentioning these these
not
hypothetical.
difficult. We
What are
have-
they? What are they?
We have more private roads than we have emergency lanes.
How many?
I don't know. How many do we have, roughly?
There are many portions of private roads that are emergency lanes and some that aren't. You know, the emergency lane designation does not carry the full length of a road. So there's an example of a private road that is not an emergency lane. Mendham's Landing is a private road, it's asphalt. Winter Street, yes, is a standalone road that is not, no portion of it is an emergency lane. Pine is over there, I don't know if any portion of Pine is designated. So there are plenty of segments of private roads that are just private roads. And legally, they're just the same as any other driveway, really.
I mean, I don't know if
Are
it's,
we maintaining those?
DELs.
No.
Not
Yeah.
portions that are not designated emergency lanes.
Exactly. So that's like the roads that were just mentioned, Winter Street, if we're not maintaining it, because it's a private road.
And that goes back to the whole goal of why we get into this, right? Because it's not about every private road that we're not maintaining now. It's about the roads that we are maintaining now and what's
But
the,
you're choosing to treat the non-emergency lane private roads differently than the emergency lane private roads.
yes, I
Yes,
am.
absolutely.
Yes, I am. Yes,
Because
I
they're
am.
private roads, they're not emergency lanes.
Because we've been taking care of these roads again for 50-odd years.
What bearing does that have on any of it? Excuse me, please, quiet, please.
You're gonna
There's
tell,
no, you think they're grandfathered somehow?
I do,
You do?
I do,
I beg to differ.
I do.
The emergency lane statute allows them to be discontinued by the town at any time. They don't
It
get
does.
any special exception. They don't have any special status under the law.
I think you should be careful.
Are you threatening me?
No, I'm not threatening you. No,
We're
no,
getting off
no,
topic here.
no.
let me ask you something, this,
I'm just trying to go back to the goal of what we're trying to do.
RSA 231, whatever, semicolon 43, I'm reading it here, I mean, saying that the municipals have the power to completely discontinue a road by the vote of town at any time, and
Is
just,
that a town road or?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, I would think it would be anything. And it says, with the ending of the public interest, the land returns entirely to the control of the abutting landowners.
That
I don't know.
applies to
That's,
class 5 and 6.
yeah, that's for a town road to revert to being a private road.
I mean, I don't think, like I said, some people have private roads, and I think they plan on keeping them private. And that's my whole thing, except I don't vote for 2 of these if we're thinking about other people that might come out 10 years from now and say, I want to do that. I mean, I probably won't be here then, but that's my way I'm gonna vote on this, is to do what we, I guess, have said we want to do. We want to help. And again, I'm sure some of them may not meet it no matter what, but.
We're trying to fix a problem for roads that have been maintained for the town for a long time. It's really what we're trying to do.
Right.
And
No,
every-
and I get, we
every-
have discussed coming up with a separate standard to try to meet them in the middle somehow. And yes,
Correct.
I agree with that. But what I worry about is, if, say at town meeting, another road comes forward with a petition to become a town road, and we tell them, okay, you meet the standard and you can do that. And then they say, but this other road was only held to this lesser standard.
But the standards clearly identifies which roads it pertains to.
Right, but anybody can cry foul when you say that there's different rules for different people, right?
Well, there already are, because we have different rules for town roads than new subdivisions. There already are different rules,
Right.
right?
But that, it doesn't, anybody can say that doesn't make it right, People can say, oh, the rules should be fair and the same for everyone, right?
Well,
Just being devil's advocate here,
I mean,
somebody can cry foul that they're being held to a higher standard than people on
Well,
other
bigger-
roads just because of where they are.
new subdivisions certainly put a bigger burden on the town than the existing town roads. So clearly, they should have a different standard. If you think about the emergency lanes, the fact that they're already being maintained to a certain standard, right? How much more of a burden is that actually gonna put on the town?
To just make them town roads?
No, to have them come up to this standard to become town roads, how much of a burden is that really gonna put on the town? Since they're already being maintained.
What do you mean by burden?
Well, maybe I
As
lost,
an expense?
yeah.
Who's paying for it?
Well, who's paying for it now?
You want the town to pay for these improvements?
No, that's not what,
Or you want the residents to maintain, to get their private property up to these standards so they can become a town road?
so I think that's a different branch of the conversation. I think we need to come back to how many standards do we have? Right? Do we have one standard or do we have 2 standards? And I maintain that we said 2 because we're trying to have a pathway for the roads that we've been maintaining all along. Not the private roads that we haven't maintained. And maybe that needs to be clearly delineated here in what we mean by this. Right? If you clearly put around this, we're talking about roads that were named emergency lanes between X date and X date. This is a progression standard for those roads. Then you can define that standard very clearly. And this one is for reconstruction, relocation of existing class 5 roads. And the subdivisions is clearly for subdivisions. If you clearly identify in each standard who it pertains to, then how does that cause any additional problems?
So you want to narrow the focus of this to just apply to emergency lanes?
No, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Don, which one, oh, you're referring to this one here?
The dirt-
Okay.
Yeah,
the dirt road
exactly, yep. Because that's what started it all,
Yeah,
right? That's what
Yes.
started it all. The private private roads that aren't emergency lanes have not been maintained by the town.
So you're saying the town, the act of the town maintaining these roads has put us in an obligation to do this?
It certainly put us in a sticky situation. Because,
We're under no legal obligation.
no, we're not under a legal obligation, but the town has been doing it for a long time. So it's probably more of like a, moral's probably too strong of a word, but it's, you know, it's something the town has been doing all along.
It's a large volume of, there's over 400 some houses. It's 20% of the town's tax revenue comes from these emergency lane roads. I mean, it's something that's, you know, and it's been coming from these. You know, even what the lawyer wrote here, which I disagree with, on his last section of his, well, saying people pay premiums for a new road. Well, people pay premiums for lots all over Nottingham. Doesn't matter if it's on a class 5 road, it's on emergency lane, it's on whatever, you're in Nottingham. You're coming to this town because of everything that it offers.
Tony, can I say two things?
Sure.
First, remember that, just one reminder, you're creating policy any future board can change, town meeting can pay attention to it or ignore it. So just remember that this is not,
And it comes back to what I said earlier.
this is not, this is in stone through March, essentially. Right, so just keep that in mind. Secondly, I've had conversations with your attorney, so I'm gonna talk like I'm him for a second. His obligation to you is to give you legal advice. If he were here, he would readily acknowledge that you have legal problems and you have political problems. Political not being a pejorative thing, it's just a different flavor of problem. He's not gonna give you political advice, that's not what you pay him for. He will give you plenty of room to juggle both of those things in the decisions that you have to make. The law does not, or, you know, interpretation of the law does not have to be the only factor that you consider, and he would tell you that. You have to
Yep.
balance political realities, risks and likelihoods of different things. I think the message that he's trying to get a couple of messages across to you in his proposed amendments to this draft. One is, don't make it easy to get around this. And two, be very careful what you accept, because the liabilities that come along with road ownership are significant. So I think those are the underlying.
Can I just specify liabilities? For whatever this is, liabilities is maintenance of what the road's going to happen, right?
Liabilities.
Is that what you mean by
for-
liabilities?
Liabilities for maintaining the road in a way that is safe to travel and does not
Safe to travel.
affect the abutting
sanding,
properties.
Plowing.
That's a relatively minor portion of the liability. The greater liability with road ownership, and particularly when you change a road, is what does it do to the abutting property owners? And the greatest risks in, let's, pick an emergency lane that you want to make a class 5 road. The greatest risk that the town will take on is not the cost of plowing it and sanding it in the future. It is the risk that the drainage of the road affects the abutting property owners. That if the drainage isn't right, your maintenance costs will be through the roof. If the drainage changes and it affects the property owners next to the road, the town will be held liable for that. That is the single biggest concern about accepting a road, not that you have to plow it more frequently or pave it every 20 years or whatever. It's what do you have to do to maintain it for safe travel, and what does it do to the abutters? Because we have no standard to follow with an emergency lane right now. If there's a humongous pothole in it, or there's a huge ice patch in it, and somebody drives off the road, and we know about it, and we don't do anything about it, and somebody drives off the road and smacks into a tree, that's not our liability. That is our liability on a class 5 road. If we know of a problem, we don't fix it, that's our liability. So
But we also have a timely standard to fix it. if an ice patch or thing gets.
No, those are just random examples, but we have a duty to the traveler on a class 5 road that we do not have on an emergency lane. We have absolutely no liability for anything on an
But again,
emergency.
not to just kind of, I understand, but just to, that's, I don't like that, how that comes off, because if you're driving down a road on a snowy night and you go off the road, you can't blame the town for the road having snow on
Okay,
it.
bad example. Pick
Well,
any
again,
condition
people are
in the
listening,
road.
So I just want to make sure these examples are put in a better terms, says,
Yeah.
no one's gonna get sued for that there, it's gonna be like, it's called an accident. I mean, you went off the road because it was snowing, should've drove slower, you could have been,
Okay, pick a different road condition that could,
again, that's why I don't know, I
Yeah,
want, you know what I'm saying, I think some of these liability terms that we're putting out there
Well-
are vague, or not really applicable, and more applicable in hypothetical situations.
if, well, I can give you a different flavor of example, but the liability rules are the same. If the guardrail falls off the bridge on McCrillis Road and there's nothing keeping you from driving into the river, somebody tells the town, hey, there's nothing to prevent me from driving off the road into the river, and we don't do anything about it, and somebody drives off the road into the river, we're liable for that.
But we're gonna come out, we're gonna put the cones up so people can see until we can get to there to fix it.
And if somebody calls the town and says, hey, a beaver dam blew out and you can't get across Mindle Road, or somebody drove into the river because there's all of a sudden a river there across the road, we don't have any liability for that. That's the duty to the traveler liability difference
Yeah,
of
but
an
I mean,
emergency on a class 5 road.
if you-
Doesn't have anything to do with this, I don't know how we got far
No,
on that,
yeah.
but-
I mean,
But that's, to go back to my original point, I think what your lawyer is trying to tell you is those two things. There are significant liabilities here, be very careful about those and work around for the stand.
So the only thing I'll say to that is, for the most part, like, and I think if you look at the emergency lanes now, the biggest liability right now is the plowing and sanding, right?
The biggest financial burden is plowing and sanding.
Okay, but we're doing it, right? So again, that's not any extra burden to the town by taking those
No.
roads on.
Negligible.
That's negligible.
Might even get better, it might even get cheaper and easier with a better road.
Right,
Who knows?
exactly.
Yeah.
The one example that you raised about if we change the road and it causes drainage problems that are, impact somebody's property. In a situation like this, is there any way that we can kind of put any conditions around that, or,
Conditions.
Well, I'm just trying to, I mean, because that is, like, that could be something that could be realistic and big, right?
Mean some way to alleviate the liability when we assume the road?
What we
Is that
call
what
it,
you
a
mean?
pre-existing condition?
Yeah, I don't know.
Because like, there's no, if you put a bunch of lots that are all together and, again, the water's gonna go down the hill, it's gonna go down where it's gonna go.
Yeah,
Just it is what it is.
yeah,
We can't, there's no way to fix it. It is what it is.
right, right. And maybe that's too picky of a thing to try and figure out right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, okay.
If there was like a property that currently, like the road is draining off on it, right? Damaging that property. And then we assume to the road, do we instantly assume that liability
Nope.
for damage?
Nope, because you could actually tell the homeowner you bought the property with that condition already there.
Yeah, but if we
I'd be
make
outside my
improvements
depth if I
to that
tried
road.
to answer that. I don't know for sure. I was not trying to get you off on a tangent. I was just trying to say, this is what I think your lawyer would say about your question about, do we pay attention to the lawyer's advice exclusively, or do we?
Yeah, and the lawyer's never gonna tell you what to do, right? The lawyer just kind of lays everything out there and waits for you to make the
All in
decision.
how you interpret what he says.
Yeah, fair enough. But again, I mean, I think we gotta come back to, are we talking about one standard or two? Let's make that decision, and then the whole board has to work as a board towards that decision. Because we can debate one or two for, you know, from now until August. But we've gotta make a decision and move forward. And we kind of all, as a board, have to agree to what that decision is and work in the best interest towards it. And if we, as a board, don't agree to that, then,
We're doing a disservice to everybody, I get it.
yep,
Yep.
yep. I'm gonna excuse myself for 2 minutes.
Yeah, Tony, I gotta leave in about 10 too, so,
Okay.
sorry.
That's all right.
Is it appropriate to ask a question?
Let's wait for Donna.
Yeah, let's wait for Donna to get back. But I'll ask, anybody that has anything to say or ask, stick to the topic at hand, which is these road standards. We don't want to go around in circles hearing about how the town's done X, Y, Z for years. I mean, we've been hearing that for over a year now. We know, okay? The topic at hand are the Class 5 road standards and the proposed gravel road standards, so please stick to that topic. Okay, or those topics.
Well, even though Donna's here, I think we should change that gravel road to just state emergency lanes, because we're just trying to fix emergency lanes.
This, don't think of this as a policy draft. This is from your engineer. We said, hey, answer this question for us, and this is him answering that question. So this would need to be turned into a, you know, or
Right, but it's a
incorporated.
guideline. It's a
Right. This is
guideline we're gonna go for if we're gonna have two different,
One or two, you're gonna.
one or two, right?
Yeah.
So we are gonna use it.
One,
as
well,
a-
one document or two documents, one standard, or if you're gonna have two standards, you're gonna use this as a.
Right,
Yeah.
but so again, and if we're gonna have two standards, this should be standardized for emergency lane standards, or getting to make them roads. And again, they're all not gonna qualify. That's gonna be another thing, but, you know, if we can get 8 miles out of the 10, we're doing a good service, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, yeah, it would get you a lot closer to solving the original challenge.
Right.
No, that's a good point, that any road that can be brought up to these conditions would be improved, an improvement. And safer than they are now, both for the residents and the town employees. John was just saying, even if not all, I'm gonna paraphrase here.
Go for it.
Not all emergency lanes may meet these standards, but even if some miles of roads can be brought to these standards, it's an improvement.
Yeah,
And that's
absolutely.
why I was agreeing that it would be safer, both the residents and town employees and equipment that has to operate on them.
Because then those roads that are still listed as emergency lanes, you know, to become a town road, have the option of, again, upgrading the road to make it to that standard. Because again, it's the purpose of setting a standard is to make a road a town road. So by having these emergency lanes have an official standard, just for the sake of getting them to pass, and what that's done is at least set those emergency lanes to that standard. Oh, thanks, dude.
I feel it's gonna be a long night.
Everybody's back, we have questions?
Yes, so who is the person that wanted to, all right, come on up.
No, thanks, I'm not. Sorry.
Okay. Should you give your name for the secretary?
Mike Russo, former chair of the ZBA.
I have spent many years talking to people about gravel roads, private roads, emergency lanes, and I have spent many years warning people about who live on those roads to beware, right?
Of what?
And I've also encouraged them of the liabilities that you guys are trying to clean up right now. And I've also encouraged them to start private road associations and start maintaining those roads for this future day, which we are now.
Speak into the mic so the people at home can hear.
Certainly. So one thing I would like to make note is I sent you guys some written commentary a few months back and asked you to read A Hard Road to Travel, published by the LGC. Right?
NHMA now.
Yeah, NH.
Yeah.
This shows you how long I've been around.
Yeah.
Right? And did you guys read that? Some of you?
I've read it.
Yep.
Some of it.
It's an important book, and it helps a lot, especially when we were hit with many of these issues at the ZBA, right? So one thing I'd like you to ask you to stop doing is this legacy road is not a thing.
Excuse me.
It's a homemade word, and it clouds the issue. It's not really a thing. I think if you stick to the definitions that are in A Hard Road to Travel, it will serve you well. The other commentary I have is looking at this low-volume gravel road. I'd like to point out that I'm thinking that the 10 homes or fewer threshold is a little bit light. Some of the roads that you're discussing have well more than 10 homes. So that, it might be too light a gravel road. When you get to the final draft, I understand that you guys are at a juncture, right? One design standard, two design standards. I'm saying if you do the two design standard, this might be a little light in terms of the number of volume, in terms of your volume, right? Which is generated by households. You need to have a good hard look at the number of households on a street.
Because you think that there are more than 10, or because you think the number of,
Correct,
okay.
right. Because in a former life, I was also an engineer. Right. So looking at all these pieces, most of it is pretty close to the Class 5 standard. Not much argument with most of it, except that the number of trips generated is very light. I think that's going to be an issue for you. Just trying to be helpful.
So is the concern that if the number of trips is assumed to be too light, that the road is not constructed to bear a heavier burden than that?
Exactly, right.
Okay.
So that's going to affect your road depths, gravel volumes, right? It may or may not impact some of your curvatures. But that's, again, that's for a professional road engineer to address. And so I'm just trying to point out a key piece for you is that 10 homes or fewer on it, you're exceeding that on most of those private roads, or at least the pieces of private roads.
There's a lot of factors to look into that. For example, some of them are year-round, some of them are not. And in my neighborhood, I can't imagine any single-family house averaging more than 10 trips per day, which is the way I read that, and that may be incorrect, but.
No, it's going on 10 average trips per day
Per house.
and for 10 houses. So that's where they get their 100
Sure,
car
but
trips.
I'm arguing that each house doesn't make 10 trips a day.
Probably not.
No,
No,
so,
I know if you live at the lake, you probably go out once a week if you can help it.
correct.
I understand that.
Okay.
I also
But
live on a private road in Maine. in the
But
summer.
your point is well taken. We can look at things like that when we get to that point. Yeah.
And again, drop legacy roads. It's not a thing.
Yeah, that one's my fault. I
Okay.
spitballed that out at one meeting and it stuck.
Thanks for owning it.
Yeah. So what would be, just stick to Class 5, Class 6,
Exactly.
emergency lane?
Right. That's a defined definition that somebody can look up and stick with.
Mhm.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
No, Class 6 is town-owned but not maintained.
I know.
Class 4 is state highways.
Yeah, okay.
Emergency lanes are just private roads that the town has taken on a maintenance interest in.
The large and Barberry Lane?
Yep.
I just got a couple questions, and basically, why are we doing this class 5, and how many of our neighbors are doing the same thing? Do our neighbors have class 5 road specifications? The other towns, Barrington, Northwood, or is it, we have looked at those people?
Some do and some don't, if I
Is
remember
it a
correctly.
majority that does, or a minority?
Couldn't tell you.
Well, couldn't tell you either.
Again, we're not trying to copy anybody to do anything, we're trying to make what's right for us here in the
Well,
town.
that's
So,
all
you
well
know,
and good, but my what if is, what if we just throw this thing away and just study this one? That was the whole thing we started with, and it grew into a class 5 specification, which the state has minimum specifications for class 5 already.
That's what,
Plus, we have zoning ordinances and other ordinances to take care of all the other stuff. We're just writing another bunch of rules to write rules?
Right, right. But as we were discussing earlier, the situation came up at town meeting last year when Moore's Road was brought forward to be accepted, and
And it was.
And the
fixed at
town-
meeting. You had.
it was, right, it was granted conditional acceptance on the condition that it met the town standard. But we
Yes.
didn't have a town standard.
That again is an EL Road,
What,
Moore's Road, wasn't it? Maybe I'm wrong.
is it?
It's-
Yeah,
Yeah, more than
almost
the
all of it, if not all of it, yeah.
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 Yeah, and if he wanted to do a subdivision, then he'd have to go through the rest of the laws, the zoning laws and the building permits and all that other baloney, so. I just don't understand why we just can't stay with this one and just take this one and file it in a circular file.
So, I'll-
Because most of the state of New Hampshire doesn't have anything like this. They go by state rules. And the other ones are all maintained by all the other rules and regulations the town's written. I mean, we've got rules and regulations this high.
so we don't
Like
have,
every board that one comes in here wants to write something instead of taking something away and throwing it in the trash can.
so we don't have standards for class 5 roads,
But do
right?
we need them? That's my point.
Well, so my opinion is yes, and it's because, no matter what members are sitting here up as the board, there's a lot of passion in this town about how we maintain the roads and the quality of roads.
Passion in this town came when John Fernal quit, and we had 2 years of,
I'm not
very
talking,
poor
I'm not,
maintained
I'm not
roads.
talking about the emergency lanes, I'm talking about road
I'm talking
wide.
about Poor Farm Road 2 years ago. You couldn't get in and out of it. Ledge Farm Road and other roads was just a mess. And it was a mess because we didn't do due diligence. I was in Florida getting phone calls and asking me, what am I gonna do? I said, call the town hall. I can't get through to them. I said, call 911.
So the
Some
town,
people.
the town was lucky when we had John Fernald, we're never gonna have a John Fernald
I'm not
again.
even asking about a John Fernal. I mean, rules don't make John Fernal.
Can I just finish?
I mean,
Could I finish what I was going to say? Okay.
Excuse me.
So I think long-term, it's in the town's best interest from the perspective of maintaining our roads and planning that we do have a road standard. And that's why I'm in favor of this Class 5 road standard. So we know that what we're working towards, and we know as we're trying to upgrade or we're trying to repair roads, that's not just a half-assed job, that it's being done right, into the right standard. And that this board and Chris and the Public Work Director were held accountable for that. And so I am totally in favor of having a standard for Class 5 roads.
I think that we ought to take a look at some of these other towns before we vote. I mean, they've got them and they don't have them. The ones that don't have them, what's the problem? What's the problem with using the state standard?
Well, it's-
I mean, we can just,
It is the state standard, essentially.
this isn't the state standard.
It's based on the state standard, correct?
It's pretty much a copy of it.
Yeah, it's pretty much a
Not
copy of
it's not a, it's a design, I think the state's words is guidelines rather than standards.
It's
but,
guidelines, that's correct.
Yeah.
But
it's
it just
pretty much
doesn't make
copy and
sense
paste.
why we're going through all this baloney. It's been since the 3rd of December last year. This has started. 3rd of December's coming up in a week and a half.
Yeah, it's a complex problem. It's not,
Well, we're making it a complex problem when you have an hour and 45 minutes of what ifs, and nothing was resolved.
I apologize.
It's okay.
Have a good holiday.
all right,
Have a good Thanksgiving, Chris.
I'll watch you later.
yeah.
My name is Kevin Jordan. I just have a little simple question. By the way, I do agree with that gentleman. Kevin Jordan. So I have a copy of the suggested minimum designs for the town roads for Class 5. but I don't have the one that you guys are talking about. Is there a way I can get that? Do you guys have copies of that? Okay.
We just got it ourselves on Friday?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe we should put it up on the website.
Good.
That way, you know,
Yeah.
they're looking at what we're looking at.
Yep, yep. We can put that up on the town website, make that available. Correct, correct. Yeah.
So I have a lot of questions, but
Give your name first, just for the... Oh, yeah, but for the folks at home that...
Charlene Anderson. So I have a lot of questions, but I won't get into them all. But what I think I will do instead is provide you some written after. But a couple of questions that I have is whether you pick one standard or whether you pick two standards, which if I had a vote, I'd vote one standard, because otherwise two standards is going to make this more complex for folks. And I would also suggest that you review these standards in against the subdivision standards, just to see where there can be some commonality in wording and or, which I've done, and will share with you. So whether one standard or two standard, I prefer one standard. Once you decide, is the, so as I understand this, is once you make these decisions, then a private road can petition for the town to become a Class 5. Is that correct?
No. We're only talking about the emergency lanes, right?
Yeah, that's the assumption.
Okay, so an emergency lane could petition to become a Class 5. It doesn't automatically mean they become a Class 5.
No.
Right.
No.
Okay, so look at the language in this document, because it could be interpreted,
Which one, the gravel standard or the,
because it actually says accepted. So again, petition for Class 5, they become a Class 5, let's say the town, votes for them to become a Class 5. So now, name a road, they're a Class 5, right? So what does that mean?
Means they're a Class 5.
Means they're a Class 5, right? So what does that mean to the land abutting that road and the landowner? It's a Class 5, right? Which means right now, if it's a private road, right, development on those private roads is up to people who own that road, and it has to go through certain requirements different than a subdivision. If it becomes a Class 5, it now opens it up to automatically become a subdivision. So you're going to see a huge amount of development. If for Tyler and Ben and Tony and Donna, if you go back to when Chris showed us a map of the amount of land that is still undeveloped along private roads, that's what the town's going to see. So fine, that happens. But my question is, are you going to review the existing emergency lane policy roads and make a determination of declassifying some of those roads prior to this?
That's been part of the discussion all along.
Because if not, then there's an existing business that's classified as an emergency lane.
As I said, that's been part of the discussion all along.
You know where I'm going?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
So again, and that's why, so this is serious and this will take a long time. So don't feel like you need to be rushed, because there's a lot at stake, right? I disagree that it's been a year and we need to come up with a decision. No, this is this is a lot. This is a lot and a long-term impact to the town. I think, so here's a thought. One of the things that we had talked about back in over a year ago about emergency lanes is that we needed to come up with criteria, right? It's vague. The existing emergency lane policy needs to be improved. It's not, there's a lot of holes and it needs to be improved. One of which we said was criteria. Why not take the suggestion from these guys and build that criteria into the emergency lane policy and put that there, right? So now you have that there to guide you for what classifies as an emergency lane, because that's what you're saying that you want these to become now, right? And then continue on with this policy for the classification of, and the, not classification, but the ongoing maintenance of existing Class 5 roads, and to give you guidance for, you know, for converting a private road into a Class 5 road. So that's some of my feedback. Just let me check my notes again. Donna, I just want to point out, because you asked a question about, like, is there an existing private road which might have two houses, and so let me back up. A subdivision is 3 houses or more.
That was the number I was looking for before.
Right. So it's 3 houses or more. So let's say there's shared driveways, 2 houses, right? We allow, in the town of Nottingham, we allow backlot subdivisions, okay? So a shared driveway could become a private road at some point in time. It could.
How?
If there's a backlot subdivision that gets approved, then that road's gonna get continued, and then folks could classify. We mentioned Winter Street. Winter Street has quite a bit of land. They could build additional houses on that road. So there are what-ifs, but we don't want to get into what-ifs, but there are. They exist, so. So one of the things too, in listening to you guys talk, there seems to be an assumption from you all that every private landowner who owns a road that may or may not be classified as emergency lane will want it to become Class 5, and that might not be the case. So. I'm just going over my notes and just trying to distinguish which ones I can just write to you. I think the rest I can just send you an email with updates. Suggested language.
That'd be great.
Edits,
Yep,
whatever.
that'd be good.
All right,
That'd
thanks.
be great.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Where is Winter Street?
I don't know.
It's off Cooper Hill.
Kevin, George again.
Off of what?
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I have a quick question too.
Excuse me.
I didn't
It
notice,
used to be an emergency lane. Used to be designated.
Kevin Jordan?
Kevin Jordan.
Yeah.
and I noticed that this didn't have the lawyer's comments on it, which would be helpful, because as a town member, if I can see what their comments are.
Which one?
This memorandum.
So Kevin, the lawyer has not commented on this.
Oh, okay, I thought you guys. were-
Nope.
No, we just got it Friday.
We just got it Friday. It was
Oh, I
put
see.
together by the engineers and Sean. So
Okay.
this hasn't been reviewed by the lawyer. It hasn't even been discussed for substance.
I see.
Until tonight.
It hasn't even been discussed for substance.
Yeah.
The lawyer's comments you're talking about came from the other.
The
Correct.
others proposed it, yeah.
I see.
Well, that's what I was saying a few minutes ago. We can put this up on the town website so that it's available to anybody that wants to look at it.
All right, but we'll have the lawyer's comments, because for us to understand what the scope of the issue is. If we know what the comments are, we can maybe suggest come up with ideas that might meet in the middle as opposed to saying, you know, being stuck, you know what I mean?
There are no lawyers' comments on this.
I think you said there was on the.
On the other one, yeah.
Yeah, the other one, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
You said you can put that up?
That I don't know. But we can look into that.
So you're gonna look into that?
Yes. Because it's legal advice, so I gotta talk that over with Chris. Make sure that it's okay to put up or not.
Okay. These would be great for transparency.
Is this Winter Street?
All right, no one else?
So,
All right. Back to the board. So, the one interesting comment that we heard from Charlene was the idea of putting these gravel road standards into the emergency lane policy as an update. Which since, I mean, if that's what we're really intending this standard for, then that kind of logically follows that would be the right place to put it, rather than making yet another new policy.
Again.
And then it would make sense to strike the acceptance language from the class 5 standard, because then we're limiting the scope of that standard to, as it says, existing class 5 roads.
So we're trying to do, so we can use this as a guide to get emergency lanes to town roads. Not to say that you need to be at these standards to become emergency lanes. Because we're trying to eliminate emergency lanes.
Well, in that respect, we don't want to hamstring a future board either. There may be some situation in the future where it really would genuinely be in the town's interest to declare a certain road an emergency lane for whatever reason.
Well, we can all,
So-
that's, we're never saying you can't.
Yeah.
But the standards we're putting on here, or the ones that we were talking about here, were to get a set of standards for emergency lanes to become town roads. That's, you know, that's why the two separate things where I was going for was, the one was to take our already owned town class 5 roads and say, this is where we want to get our goal up to get to, you know, Kennard Road up to that level, to get Port Farm up to that level, to get, whatever road, up to that standard. And then this here was to get these because they're not the same size, big, or whatever.
Right.
Up there.
But then again, if you know, if a private road that is an emergency lane doesn't want to become a town road for some reason, why would we not want, if it's going to stay an emergency, then why would we not want to improve its condition? Steer it towards this improved state. Why would we not want to do that?
Why would you?
For all the reasons that we want to have improved standards now. Safety of our employees, safety of the residents, wear and tear on our vehicles, and so on.
You know, I just, with all due respect to our great highway department, there have been more safety issues on town-maintained roads than there have been on emergency lanes.
So is that a reason to not have any standard for emergency lanes?
No, I just don't buy the argument that a reason for upgrading emergency lanes is for employee safety. I just don't buy it.
Well, Don, you have to take in consideration that some of these town roads are more high-traveled versus some of these EL lanes. So I think that's an unfair.
It happens when they plow. We've had plow trucks go into other plow trucks and go off the road, and it's all been on town roads and not emergency lanes. Anyway, we're going on almost 2 hours. And if this board can't make a decision on whether or not we're talking about one standard or two standards, then I think we ought to call the meeting. Because we're not gonna get past anything unless we agree to that.
We can make a vote on whether we do one or two standards. It doesn't have to be 5 unanimous. So if you feel against it, you can always express that you're against it. Feel you're for it, you are for it. Again, the purpose of having 5 is to make a vote. If we're all gonna sit here to come to agreement, that might never happen, and this is why we keep going round robin all the time, because
Exactly.
we need to step up and say, and if you disagree, then state your point why you disagree and stick with it.
But
That's
then
fine.
once we make a vote, we all have to move forward as a board in that direction.
Absolutely.
That's how
We're
it
all here to
goes.
work for the town, but, you know,
Well, like I said, I could agree with the striking of those words, assuming that we put these standards into the emergency lane policy, because that seems like a logical fit to me.
I think that's a whole separate debatable issue. Do we want to accept these as a standard for for class 5 roads, and then determine how we're gonna handle the others under separate policies? And if we do have 2 policies, then the acceptance of pre-existing private roads in this standard causes confusion.
I don't think so.
I think we should fix the EL policy that we started this whole thing. To begin with, Charlene was right when she had mentioned that that's what started all this. This would be a good fit for that. I agree with you, Tony. But then it comes back to two standards again.
so here's just another suggestion that comes to
Yep,
mind.
yep.
This standard, the one we were talking about, the lawyer's judgments, all this, and we table that. And we just work on this and just work on emergency lanes and that's it.
I would be in favor of that.
I would run that.
And then when that's taken care of, then we can put this out here to address everything else in town.
I'd be in favor of that.
I would too. I mean, I'm a little worried now that, I mean, finding out, who knows, the attorney comes and goes, oh, you guys can't do this. I don't know.
Right. Well, like I said, we just got this Friday. It's too soon to vote on this.
But what I want to state right now is the fact that let's just make sure that, I mean, is that an idea we can all, or
Yes,
the majority of us agree on, is that we are going to table this idea, use what we got, because we've been waiting for this for a long time, the engineer, and work on just getting those roads to say, because remember, we were gonna go to each road and say, okay, this road meets it here, this road meets it here. These were plans we had before. This road meets it here, this road meets it, this road needs this improvement or this improvement to get there, so that we can eliminate it and say, this is what? This road this road meets it, this road, and these are the 5 roads that don't.
yep.
And then, and that's, so if we, again, like I said before, if we can get 8 miles of the roads, or 7 or 8 miles of the roads, that's already wide, already done, into the class of a town road,
So I just want to be clear. I'm in favor of tabling this for now. I'm sorry, Lorraine. The class 5 standard.
Minimum standards for,
I'm in favor of tabling that for now in the interest of moving forward. Just to be clear, I don't support, if this is what was suggested, that this becomes the emergency lane standard without discussion.
no, because there's things on there I think we should discuss, as.
Correct.
As what Mr. Russo
Correct.
read
So-
right there.
So,
We'd have to strike that. We have to strike the low volume gravel to make it say emergency lane standards or emergency lane standards.
so we're coming up
We
with
have
new
to-
emergency lane standards, but that doesn't necessarily give the pathway to town road. Right? Because this was intended as a pathway to town road for the emergency lane roads.
I'm not following where you.
Well, this was, you're not a town, like, you're not a pre-existing town road.
Right.
You're not an emergency lane, but you're an emergency lane who has grown up into a form of a town road. That's what this was, correct? This was not an emergency lane standard.
Well, this was based on the emergency lanes.
Yeah, but this is,
That's what we were talking about, the gravel.
yeah, but this is more stringent than emergency lanes. So we would have to discuss all of this.
Yeah, well, I have to ask us too, because I don't know what a vertical curve K.
Sure, sure, I mean, I don't either, so I just, it's not just a matter of looking at this and going, yeah, okay, this is what you have to, I didn't mean to do that. This is what you have to do now to be an emergency lane, that's all I'm clarifying, right? This wasn't intended as an emergency lane policy.
No, but this was, in my thought process was, this was intended to get us to the
Yes.
fact of making
Yes.
emergency lanes.
But there are some that are going to meet this and become this
Sure.
classification, but there are others that are going to stay emergency lanes potentially.
Correct.
Okay, so there's still two different standards.
Well, emergency lane, there is no standards, it's what it is what it is.
Well, there's a policy.
The town has to keep it to the minimum passable way as first, we understand that, that's different than
This could
the other
fix some of
parts.
that.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so,
Down the corner, there you go.
The emergency lane policy does have some width and clearance guidelines in it, not as detailed as this, but it does have some measurements in it.
But again, that was the intent, to keep it always an emergency lane and not try to get it to make it a town road.
So John, you're in favor of making this part of the EL policy? Is that what I'm getting from you?
No, it's to use, again, was to discuss the standards, and my whole process, which I thought we were at, was to take the fact of emergency lanes, make a standard for what emergency lanes need to be up to in order to become a town road.
so John, if we,
Right, that's, the whole purpose is to, and then, if your road isn't even close to it, and we've been maintaining it as emergency lane, well, that stays under the emergency lane.
that's all I'm trying to
That stays
clarify.
till there. Now, if a board later on, if the never gets upgraded, never gets changed, and, as like Tony said before, if a whole other board comes in, and those smaller road, again, it is, I'm trying to find a way to,
But there's still gonna have to be that designation of, here's the criteria that you meet to be still maintained as an emergency lane. For those roads that don't come up to this criteria, but they still meet criteria for being an emergency lane. Right?
That exists, doesn't it?
No, emergency lane is not a classification of road.
No.
It's a
No,
legal-
it's not.
It's a legal.
Yeah, we know that, we get that.
Well, I don't think that everybody knows that.
The town has standards for that.
no.
We have a policy, we have a
We have a
policy.
policy.
Yeah.
The town has a misguided policy which breaks state law.
So, John, I think we're saying the same thing, it's just, yes, this is intended to provide an opportunity for emergency lanes to become town roads if they meet that certain set of standards, right?
Right.
Yeah, but there potentially could be some roads that don't meet this, will never meet it, but still meet the criteria for being, having that emergency lane designation.
Yeah, I don't want to take anybody's designation, emergency lane designation from anybody. If it's been doing it for 50 years, I don't want to, but.
Yeah, that's not a legal requirement for.
No, but again, I'm
But
not.
we
emergency
did
lanes.
say,
I know, but I know what
we
you're
did
saying.
say we would revisit some of that, because there are some that potentially
Exactly.
shouldn't be on that road, that list, but,
But one of the topics that's been around all the time is to take this number of 10 miles
Yep,
of
I agree.
emergency lanes and knock it down.
great.
And over the years, a lot of these emergency lanes are going to meet a pretty dang, a much better standard than a lot of the others.
So this is going to be the vehicle for which we do that, where we attack, where we are able to address some of them.
Because then I'd be perfectly happy, once that's, again, even these suggested standards we have here, which I'd fully support later on, is something that, there's no timeline.
Correct.
If it takes 10 years for us to,
Yeah.
comes to do it, then that's what it is.
I mean, I support those too, it's just the clarification between who it applies to was my big concern, that's all. But I'm happy to table that discussion.
And so, yeah, because again, it's the process of eliminating this every couple of years.
So we need a motion to table it then, right?
I'm looking at Laconia, I mean, just reading up on there, and then, like the gentleman back there said, I mean, any road that hasn't been accepted by the town is considered as a private road. But they break them down into 3 different groups. They must have gone through the same thing we did, but they, looks like there's an avenue to maintain, take care of, or call some just, you know, like they have the 3 basic groups. They have private roads that were developed by the private, to be private, and are never intended to become public. You know, and they have examples of streets.
So that'd be like your associations.
Yeah. But I mean, but then they have roads that have not been accepted by the town with accordance to state law, but they were intended for public and private use, which I believe what we're talking about, that's probably a good definition of the roads for the majority we're speaking of. And again, it says the board has control of costs associated with maintaining these emergency lanes, as they're calling them now.
Can you send that to us, Tyler?
Yeah, I just, like I said, I'm reading, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I just looked at our emergency lane policy or whatever from whenever, it looks like there is a lot of holes in it.
And this policy could, or just memorandum here, could fix some of that, if we can all come to an agreement. And then we can move on to the class 5. So, do we need a motion for tabling the class 5, or how do you want to proceed?
Yeah, that would probably be the right way to do it.
I'll make a motion to table the class 5.
Second. Standard.
The proposal for Class 5 road standards.
The town of Nottingham's minimum design standards for town roads is how it's listed on ours.
Will this be put on the agenda for next meeting?
Is a week enough time?
I don't see why not.
I,
Table it till next meeting?
yep.
Till Monday?
No, we're not tabling that till next Monday.
Yes.
No, we're not.
That's what we're talking
No,
about
no,
right
no,
now.
no.
No.
What I meant was that, are we gonna continue to talk about whatever?
This.
On Monday?
Oh.
So the agenda for...
Yeah, I don't see why.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we'll come back to the class 5 once we figure out the EL.
Right. That's, yes.
That's what I meant, sorry, I didn't,
So just so we're all clear on our homework, and for people to understand, on Monday, we're gonna work on setting a standard for the emergency lanes
To become town roads.
to become town roads.
yes.
That's what you envision this as?
Starting, yeah.
Now,
Distinct from whatever standards are already outlined in the emergency lane policy.
Right, because they're, like you said, they're so vague that they're not even,
yep,
you know, again, like when we had, I go back and look for them, like when we were listing, you know, when they actually did that, going around, look and say, okay, here, look, everything was 16 feet here, these are where they were under 16 feet, this is where this was here, this is where this ledge, you know, this hill was here. You know, those are things where we asked the Selectmen and Chris, and Sean to go around, I mean, you know, Sean and Chris to go around and look at all these EL roads and make a map, which they gave us, to see where these points are, so that we know, hey, when we have that map in front of us, which we should have on Monday, that we can say, and I'll use, for instance, just Shore Drive, just because it's 27 feet wide for a mile and a half, or however you want to say. We know that's already there, so we know that would meet up to. But, you know, I mean, we
but
have
then we
to
gotta
find
talk
the,
about the type of material in which that road is made out of, and whether that meets its standard.
Yeah, we just have to define the standards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, we have a motion and a second.
but we can always upgrade those too, down the road.
Yeah. All right, let me get this out of the way. We have a motion and a second to table the Class 5 proposed standards. So, let's vote on that. All in favor? All opposed? I'm abstaining.
Now, can I make a statement? I'd like to see that, as a board, we do our due diligence. If that means we meet weekly to ensure that we are hammering this out, then so be it.
I agree.
Yeah.
We all in agreement?
But I just want to make sure we have a good focus on what we're
Yeah.
coming to do,
Yeah, and we'll set that up
about
each
on
time
Monday.
we meet, yeah.
Exactly.
We're going over this.
so that we're not going around again
Yep.
on different things.
Now, you know what?
So this meeting's not adjourned yet, but.
Sorry, go ahead, finish.
No, go on.
No, I was just trying to, in the interest of expediency, like, there are things here that, like, I don't know what a vertical curve K value
Or a
is.
sag curve, yeah,
Right.
we need some definition.
So I'm wondering if that's something that we can get from Chris,
I'm sure we could.
Or Sean.
or Sean, whoever,
Probably be better.
from Sean.
Google those will come up. Those are civil engineering terms, they'll come up with Google.
Yeah,
Yeah, CMA engineers probably knows exactly what they are. We could probably ask them too what their definition was.
sure.
The guy who wrote this.
Sure, yeah,
clarify.
but I just, the idea is, let's get to a common understanding of what these are, and if there's any way we can do that before Monday, then that would help be a more productive conversation.
Yep.
That's all I was getting at.
Yep.
And I know we can Google it, but if we can all have a common understanding of what that is, then I think it would be beneficial to the discussion.
Agreed.
So on Monday, a goal for us would be, at the end of that meeting, to have a set of standards for emergency lanes. That should be our end goal for that meeting.
The only thing I'll say to that, John, is it might be a little aggressive to say that we're gonna have it done that night. I would be more comfortable saying, we're going to have a good draft that can be voted on
Okay.
at the next meeting, or, you know,
Allow us some time to digest.
just allow
Yeah.
us, so we're not discussing and voting in the same night, that's all.
Now, will that also be available on the website for folks at home to see?
The draft?
Because they're gonna wanna.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, do we have the class 5 draft on the webpage?
If it's discussed in a public meeting,
There's no
then
reason not
there's
to.
no reason not to.
Yeah, yeah, I don't see
Yeah.
why not. Okay.
No, it gives them an opportunity to view it as
To
well.
read and digest as well. Yep, yep. Okay.
Okay,
Make a motion, we adjourn.
I second.
Yeah, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
We got a second.
Meeting's adjourned.